right, we are going to start off with the week 3-4 packet. If you don't have it yet, because I'm bringing it to you today, that's fine. I'm going to put it all online anyway. But if you want your packet in front of you, feel free to grab it. It's in the bag that you picked up on Friday with all of your stuff from school in the bag too. All right. So, hold on. Okay, there we go. All right. So we're going to start with this reading just to get it out of the way. Let's see if I can find the beginning. Okay. So we are looking at this story. It's called Vaqueros. It's America's First Cowboy. All right, this is set up a little different than the last time. Okay, maybe. Let's see if we can do this. Okay, I will tell you that pictures are very important to this story because we're working on a skill that has to do with them. So it starts with, imagine 500 years ago that there were no cows or horses in North and South America. Thousands of years earlier, there had been horses, but they disappeared. Since there were no cows, there were no cowboys. Of course, today there are cowboys. It is all because of Christopher Columbus. And you should know a little bit about him. He's one of our main explorers. All right, the journeys. After his voyage to the Americas in 1492, Christopher Columbus returned to Spain. He told the Spanish king and queen of the riches to be found in the paradise he discovered. He described the native people who lived there. The royal couple agreed to more voyages. They needed gold to help pay for their expanding empire. The following year, Columbus returned to the West Indies. He brought 17 ships loaded with over 1,000 settlers, horses, and cattle. The ships dropped anchor at an island they named Hispaniola. Espanola. Today, the island is shared by Haiti and the Dominican Republic. For the next 25 years, Spanish ships sailed in and out of Espanola. The Spaniards explored and conquered the nearby islands. The native islanders were enslaved. Thousands died of smallpox, a terrible disease for which they had no resistance. As the islanders disappeared, they were replaced by the settlers and their animals. So here's a picture. It says Christopher Columbus landed on the island of Espanola in 1493. All right. We have another picture up top. Hernan Cortez brought horses back to the mainland of North America. So I'm sure we're about to learn about that. In 1503, Hernan Cortez, a Spanish explorer, arrived in the West Indies. He spent several years helping to conquer Cuba. Then, in 1518, Cortez set out with a fleet of 6 ships to explore the nearby coast to the west. On board were 500 men and 16 horses, strong enough to carry a man in full armor. The ships dropped anchor near where the port of Veracruz, Mexico is today. The Teutonic people who lived there welcomed Cortez. They offered to help him conquer the hostile Aztec Empire that had long dominated them. Cortez did so in 2 years. He claimed all the lands in the name of the Spanish king. He called the land New Spain. It wasn't long before the Spanish conquerors brought more livestock to the colonies. The animals were allowed to graze on the open grasslands. Many took off into the wilderness, forming large herds of wild horses and cattle. All right. Expanding the colony. The Spanish king rewarded Cortez and his soldiers with gifts of land. Throughout New Spain, they built ranches called haciendas and prospered. Accompanying the soldiers and settlers were Catholic missionaries. They had come to convert the native people. They moved north, building missions and churches along the California coast, extending the lands of New Spain. In 1540, Francisco Vasquez de Coronado organized an expedition into the Northern Territories. Coronado was searching for the legendary golden cities of Cibola. Along with the men and supplies, he brought 500 longhorn cattle to supply meat and hides. All right, so then we have this picture, and it says, review the map. What water sources run through the area known as Spain? So they're kind of asking you a question, but we'll probably come back to this. All right, we have another picture that says an early vaquero lassos a steer. The expedition never found the city of gold. However, it did introduce the first longhorns to what is now the American Southwest. From these 500 longhorns, 10 million had spread across the Texas plains by the 1800s. That's a lot. The soldiers and priests of New Spain were already acquainted with raising cattle in Spain. Many were skilled horsemen. Even so, they needed help in rounding up the livestock on their sprawling lands. At that time, it was against the law for any native person to ride a horse. But the ranchers and priests needed help. They taught the natives to convert to ride and use the lasso, a looped rope. These men who worked with horses and cattle were called vaqueros. In Spanish, the word means cowman. With the vaqueros, a new culture took root in the West. It lives on today. Coronado introduced a longhorn, so this is a longhorn, if you didn't know what that was. All right, let me go to the next page. All right, we are in the way of life section. This is a herd of mustangs, a type of horse. The vaquero's job was to keep tabs on cattle in the wild and round them up. It took many vaqueros to surround a herd so that it could be moved to the hacienda. The roundups were called rodeos in Spanish. Rodeo comes from the verb that means to go around. The vaqueros were also needed to capture the wild horses that flourished on the prairies and valleys of the large haciendas. The vaqueros called the horses mateinos, a word that would become mustangs. Vaqueros spent most of their lives in the saddle, riding hard in all kinds of weather. At night they sat around the fire where they cooked their meals. They told stories and sang songs about their lives. Then they rolled up into their ponchos to sleep. From California to Texas, native vaqueros were acknowledged to be the best horsemen in the world. All right, so here's an early vaquero doing the job in a modern saddle. That's what they look like now. A vaquero had to cope with a rough landscape and harsh weather. He needed the roots and tools to do his job. Vaqueros wore wide-brimmed hats called sombreros, or sombra means shade in Spanish. The sombrero protected vaqueros from the burning sun. A vaquero also wears chapreras, or chaps. These were leather leggings worn over trousers. They protected the vaquero from cactus, thickets of wild brush, and rope burns. The horses belonged to the owner of the hacienda. The vaquero, however, owned the saddle that he put on the horse. The saddle had to be comfortable for both horse and rider. The vaquero's feet slid into 2 wooden stirrups and hung from the saddle. The vaquero's most trusted tool is his lasso, also known as the lariat. Often a vaquero would have to gallop after a runaway steer. He would toss the loop of the lariat around the steer's horns, neck, or foot. Then he would wrap the rope around his saddle horn and rein in the horse. This would hold the steer or bring it to the ground. Once the herds were together, they calmed down and began to graze. Mounted vaqueros would separate the calves from their mothers to brand them with the hacienda's mark. The Vaquero Legend. In 1821, Mexico won its War of Independence from Spain. All of New Spain became the independent nation of Mexico. The northern lands of Mexico, however, were difficult to govern. Many American immigrants crossed into the territory that would one day become Texas. Soon there was a large population of Americans in Texas. In fact, they outnumbered the Mexican residents who lived there for generations. With the Americans came changes in the culture of the vaquero. Even the word changed. When the Americans tried to say vaqueros, it came out buquera. Later, the word became buckaroo. Buckura, I'm assuming. Later, it became buckaroo. It was only after 1860 that men who worked with cattle were called cowboys. So cowboys contained the culture of the vaquero, or continued it. They continued that culture doing the same thing. In 1836, Texas declared itself independent from Mexico. 9 years later, it joined the United States. Then, in 1847, Mexico lost a war with the U.S. As a result, it lost its northern lands. They would become the states of California, Nevada, Utah, and parts of Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Wyoming. After the end of the Civil War, the vaqueros were joined by freed slaves and young men from the East. These newcomers wanted a new life in the wide open spaces. They had to learn what the vaqueros had been doing for centuries. The large ranches needed many men to manage the huge herds of cattle on the vast prairies. Cattle drives would take weeks to travel from ranches to railroads. From there, the cattle traveled to the markets in the eastern and western cities. The invention of barbed wire made it possible to build fences to keep the cattle in pastures. The vaquero was not needed to ride the wide open spaces. Long cattle drives became unnecessary. The decline of the vaquero began. Yet the vaquero's tradition did not fade from the American imagination. At the turn of the century, the cowboy became the hero of the West. Books, magazine stories, and early movies featured brave exploits of the American cowboy. Okay, so cowboy movies were among the first movies made. So even though these vaqueros were the original, what we would refer to as cowboys, they kind of came to an end, and then this idea of cowboy, we created Americans as we kind of took over this land that wasn't originally ours. All right, the last page. So we did not come up with the idea of cowboys. Is kind of what this is telling us. This is how cowboys originated. Celebrating traditions. Today, the arts and skills of the vaquero can be seen in two countries. They appear in the charrerías, I think is how you say it, I don't know, of Mexico and the rodeos of the United States. Both vaqueros and cowboys pride themselves in their skills. They keep alive the traditions and cultures of their past. On September 14th, Mexicans celebrate El Dia del Charro. It is a holiday of parades, church services, music, and charrerías. The charrería is a rodeo where vaqueros can exhibit their skills. They perform the charros and charras, gentlemen and women riders. The men dress in their elegant silver buttoned outfits and large sombreros. The women wear the traditional dress of the China poblana. Many of the events performed in the rodeos and charrerías are similar. Both may include riding a bucking horse or bull and getting thrown off, for example. But like the first vaqueros, the riders are ready. There is an old saying in the corrals. It goes, "There has never been a horse that can't be rode. There's never been a cowman who hasn't been throwed." The grammar may not be right, but the idea is pure cowboy. So this is more of our modern tradition. What you hear it as a rodeo. They obviously do this in Mexico, and it has a different name. Obviously, the ones I don't know how to pronounce as well. So the horse rears, throwing its rodeo rider. So he's throwing him right off. So just kind of what you know as what a rodeo is. So there's 2 pages today. It says Vaqueros, America's First Cowboy. So it says write captions for graphics, so captions for pictures. In an informational text, graphic features such as maps and drawings can help the reader understand the text. So when you have pictures, with what you're reading, it kind of helps you understand. There's usually a close connection between the text and images appearing on the page. So they're saying if you were reading a book about, I don't know, the 3 Little Pigs, and on one page it said the straw house got blown down, you would probably see a picture of a straw house on that page. So it says, read page 698, then look carefully at the picture on the page. How does this illustration help you understand the discoveries made by Columbus? Okay, so now this means that I need to figure out what these actual pages are. So hold on one second. Read the page 700, then look carefully at the map on the page. Okay, so see if we can get these right. Okay, so I'm going to mark these for you. This is going to be page 700. Oh, maybe I'm going to mark these for you. Hold on. I clicked the wrong button, that's why. Okay. So this is page 700. This would be 698. All right, let's see what other pages we need to mark for this. And 701. Uh-oh, where did my numbers go? Okay, well, this is 701. Usually they stay when I do this. Hold on. Oh, they're there. 698, 700, 701. Okay. So now let's go back to the questions. Apparently I have to zoom out to make it look the way I want. Okay, so read page 698, then look carefully at the picture on the page. How does this illustration help you understand the discoveries made by Columbus? So we'll go up to that page. Sorry, too far. Okay, and then you're gonna need to read it. And then how does this picture help you understand what discoveries Columbus made? Okay, that's what it's asking you. So then number 2, read page 700, then look carefully at the map on the page. How does this map help you understand the information in the text about New Spain? So if we read, it's telling us about New Spain. This big grayed out area is all of what they're saying New Spain is. So what does this map help you understand about New Spain? And then this little question down here would probably also be useful, where it says what water sources run through the area known as New Spain. Okay, so what they're probably going for is, what do you notice about places we know today that are not considered New Spain that are in here? Okay. And then the last one on that page, it says read page 701, then look carefully at the image of the vaquero on the page. How does this picture help you understand the work of the vaquero? Okay, so 701. So they're talking about right here. So I would just read this page again. Then how does this help you understand what a vaquero does, what his job is? And then the second page, I think I'm going to have you try. Let me read it first with you though. So a caption is a brief statement that accompanies an image. The caption should help link the image with the text on the page, which we've talked about. The author of Vaqueros, America's First Cowboy, has asked you to write new captions for some of the graphic features in the story. So it says read page 703 and write a new caption for the picture on that page. Give information that helps the reader connect the picture to the text. So all you have to do is write a new caption. So 703, that's 701, 702, so this would be 703. So they want you to read this and write a new caption about this picture. So you're not gonna write a modern saddle, but you need to read this and based off something that's in here, relate it to this picture, just to help describe this image and help it relate to what the author was saying. Okay, so that's what you do for that one. And then it says on page 704, write a caption for the picture of the cowboy at the top of the page. Give information that helps the reader connect the picture to the text. So we just did 703. So on this page, 704, this picture does not have a caption at all. So what they want you to do is they want you to write a caption to go with it that matches what the text is saying. So just, captions aren't very long. If you look right here, they're these short little things, but they relate to the text. So you're gonna write a caption for this guy right here, okay? I am gonna delete that little bubble I just drew though, because I think it's gonna be in the way of the text. So that is what you need to do for reading. So you're gonna listen, obviously, then you'll hear my directions, and then you need to do these 3 and these 2 questions. And honestly, that should not be too tricky. This one's a lot better than the other two assignments that were given, I would say, for reading. All right, and that is all for reading today.